Good morning, class.
Good morning, class.
Mrs. Bloom greeted her students with a warm smile. Today was a special day in Mrs. Bloom's class. They were going to talk about something very important: disaster risk reduction and management. It sounded long and complicated, but Mrs. Bloom promised it would be easy and fun.
Can anyone tell me what a disaster is?
Mrs. Bloom asked, her eyes twinkling. Little Leo, who loved reading adventure books, raised his hand excitedly.
It's like a big storm or an earthquake, right?
That's right, Leo. Disasters can be scary, but if we know what to do, we can stay safe.
Mrs. Bloom then showed the class an emergency kit. It had items like a flashlight, water bottles, and a first aid kit. She explained how each item could help them during a disaster. The students listened carefully, their eyes wide with curiosity. Mrs. Bloom also drew pictures on the board to show what to do during different types of disasters. She made sure everyone understood. The class even practiced safety drills. They learned how to drop, cover, and hold on during an earthquake and where to go if there was a fire. By the end of the lesson, the students felt more confident and prepared. They knew that with the right knowledge, they could face any disaster bravely. Disasters can happen anytime and anywhere.
Disasters can happen anytime and anywhere. That's why it's important to be prepared.
Mrs. Bloom explained, her voice gentle.
Being prepared means knowing what to do before, during, and after a disaster. It's like having a plan, just like when we have a fire drill.
The children nodded in understanding. They knew how important it was to be prepared for a fire, and now they were learning about being prepared for other emergencies too. Let's talk about typhoons. These powerful storms can cause a lot of damage, so it's important to know how to stay safe.
Let's talk about typhoons. They are intense tropical storms with strong winds and heavy rain.
Mrs. Bloom said, pointing to a picture of a swirling storm on the board. She explained how typhoons form over warm ocean waters and can travel great distances.
Typhoons bring strong winds and heavy rains. These conditions can be very dangerous, causing flooding and damage to buildings. What are some things we can do to stay safe during a typhoon? Mrs. Bloom asked the class, encouraging them to think about safety measures.
Lily remembered what her mum always told her. She raised her hand and shared her thoughts with the class.
We can stay inside. It's safer to be indoors where we are protected from the wind and rain. Excellent, Lily. Staying indoors is very important. It keeps us away from flying debris and other dangers. We should also stay away from windows and doors. These areas can be hazardous if the glass breaks or if strong winds push through.
And Max, who was always prepared, added his thoughts. He knew the importance of being ready for anything.
And we should have flashlights and candles ready in case the lights go out. It's important to have a source of light if the power fails.
Great point, Max. Being prepared with emergency supplies can make a big difference during a storm. Let's all remember these tips to stay safe.
Section 4. Earthquake Preparedness. Drop, cover, and hold. In this section, we will learn about the essential steps to take during an earthquake to ensure your safety. These steps are simple, but can make a huge difference in protecting yourself and others around you.
Now let's talk about earthquakes. Earthquakes are sudden and can be very frightening. They occur when there is a sudden release of energy in the Earth's crust, causing the ground to shake. This shaking can be mild or very strong, and it can last for a few seconds or even minutes.
Mrs. Bloom continued, transitioning to another type of disaster. She explained that while earthquakes are unpredictable, being prepared can help reduce the risk of injury and damage. It's important to know what to do before, during, and after an earthquake.
Earthquakes can make the ground shake a lot. This shaking can cause buildings to collapse, roads to crack, and objects to fall. It's crucial to stay calm and act quickly to protect yourself.
Mrs. Bloom asked, her eyes encouraging the children to think. She wanted them to understand the importance of being prepared and to remember the steps they had practiced.
What should we do if the ground starts to shake? Drop, cover, and hold. This means dropping to your hands and knees to prevent being knocked over, covering your head and neck to protect from falling debris, and holding on to something sturdy until the shaking stops.
Shouted the children in unison, remembering the earthquake drill they had practiced before. They knew that practicing these steps regularly would help them stay safe during a real earthquake.
That's exactly right. Mrs. Bloom praised the students for their quick and correct response. She emphasized that knowing what to do can make a big difference in an emergency.
Mrs. Bloom exclaimed. She reminded the students that practicing these drills at home with their families is just as important as practicing them at school.
Remember to drop to your knees, take cover under a sturdy table or desk, and hold on tight until the shaking stops. Always stay away from windows and heavy objects that could fall. By following these steps, you can protect yourself and help others stay safe during an earthquake.
Section 5, Family Emergency Plan, Staying Connected When It Matters.
Class, it's also important to have a family emergency plan.
Mrs. Bloom emphasized, moving on to another crucial aspect of disaster preparedness.
This plan helps you and your family stay connected and safe during an emergency.
Asked Emily, always curious to learn new things.
What kind of things should be in a family emergency plan?
Great question, Emily.
Your plan should include important phone numbers, meeting places in case you get separated, and a list of emergency supplies.
Section 6. Role-playing safety practice makes perfect. To make sure her students understood everything, Mrs. Bloom decided to do a role-play activity. She divided the class into groups and assigned each group a different disaster scenario. One group practiced staying calm and calling for help during a fire, while another group practiced drop, cover, and hold during an earthquake simulation. The classroom buzzed with energy as the children actively participated, their voices filled with seriousness and a hint of amusement. Section 7. Reflecting on disaster preparedness, key takeaways.
Today we learned so much about disaster preparedness.
Mrs. Bloom gathered her students on the colorful rug at the front.
We learned about typhoons, earthquakes, and the importance of having a family emergency plan.
Mrs. Bloom and her students sit in a circle on a colorful rug, reflecting on the day's lesson.
Remember, being prepared helps us stay safe and protect ourselves and our loved ones.
She reminded them, her eyes sweeping across each attentive face.
It's always better to be prepared than scared.